So thank you everyone for this first talk of Impact Career Talk, which we are starting from today. This is the first talk that we are having, and our key objective of these kind of talks is to help people move forward in their career through inspiration and more awareness by listening to people who have already traversed some part of that journey in their own lives. And we will bring people who are following their passion and are doing really great work, which inspires me uh, for the first place. And I feel that if they can inspire me, it is my obligation and a duty also as a coach to share the insights that I get to the other people. So it's great to have uh, such people around us who can always motivate and inspire. So on that note, on today's inaugural first talk, it was difficult to start with whom we can have this beautiful journey. But none other than Kshitiz, who happens to be my super senior from IIT Guwahati. He's a design stalwart. He has lived, eaten, drunk, everything designed for himself. And this is not his only profile that we talk about. His more inspiring work is in north of Bihar, setting up and taking his non-profit organization called Happy Horizons Trust to new heights in a space of education and healthcare. And he is adding more domains also, depending on the need of the communities, which is even more inspiring. So we'll have the conversation today with Kshitiz. Thank you for having you with us. And it is great that we are starting this journey with you.
Absolutely pleasure to be here. Thank you so much, Ravish, for the opportunity. And of course, I see a lot of familiar faces as well as some new faces. But great to meet everyone here on the call today. And of course, people who would be eventually seeing this recording later on as well, right? So, yeah, it's been journeys are always inspiring when you look back at it because there's always lots and lots of learning. And as one of my kind of inspiration, Steve Jobs says, right, that you only connect the dot backwards. And I always try to do that in terms of find what aspired me to do something, and what was the learnings from it. So hopefully we can cover more of those things ahead of us today.
So we have not kept everything to unravel because we have only 1 hour. But how I have planned this to be is to go through your journey and different inflection points, which I believe are important for people to help reflect on. And you can give your perspective during that time at each moment. And maybe that would be, in a nutshell, will also be a story that people can take back with themselves. So just starting on it, for the people who are uninitiated and are also listening to this recording, let me also tell you that Kshitiz has been one of the few people who have moved from corporate to non-profit and back to corporate and now back to non-profit. So he is someone who has experience of both world, and how he has managed to make this change possible for himself is something very inspiring. It's a lot of people who come to me ask me, it is not a irreversible movement. Like once you have moved into non-profit world, it is very difficult to go back and then come back. So you have made that switch very, very relatable. So I look forward to having that conversation. So just starting, which is very intrinsic to all of us, how have been your childhood so I think you are born and brought up in Saharsa, north of Bihar. So how have been your childhood and what have been the key influences, key inspiration leading up to the time when thinking about IIT really struck? So how was that time for you?
So thanks for this wonderful starting question. So I think, for me, I had a very interesting childhood because one, of course, I spent obviously like early years of my childhood in North Bihar, literally living in a village in Saharsa district. So it's not even a town. Uh, and interestingly, my parents were still in medical college when I was, growing up in my early childhood days, like the grade 1 to 5. And because of which I was spending a lot of time in my village with my grandparents, right? Living the village life, literally, like running around fields and the entire village life, right? With no exposure to a city or a town culture at all. And funnily, I actually had to uh, join school when I joined school when I was 6 years old. And before that, I'd never gone to a school for two reasons, right? One was, of course, I was in the village and there was no schools there. Secondly, because my parents are doctors, so they wanted me to at least get into school at the right time, right? But the problem was that there were no schools in that region. Right? Like I'll say, like there were some good some schools, like government schools, but not like that you would expect like a good quality schools in the region, right? So as a result of which, I actually was sent to a boarding school at 5.5 years or 6 years of age, right? And one, because my parents were in a transferable job and they were constantly moving, and this is Bihar in the late 80s, early 90s. The culture was very different. The socio-political environment was very different. Uh, so because of for many reasons, I actually went to a boarding school in class KG itself, right? So which was kind of very unheard of. But
Mm.
then obviously, but but then obviously because I was constantly doing holidays and vacations, coming back to Bihar and staying in Bihar itself. So growing up all throughout, that kind of didn't really leave from the fact that I was primarily from Bihar, right? So I was primarily from there, from the region. And when you're in the region, which is basically the Saharsa region, right? The Kosi region, which is, if you look at all the development indexes, it's kind of very, backwards in terms of, education, healthcare, malnutrition, uh, all the other factors, right? So from there, while I was, constantly doing this boarding school to back to home, back to boarding school life, obviously I was constantly witnessing the life around, right? When it comes to the in terms of human development, in terms of poverty, in terms of the challenges, those societal challenges that exist around there, right? And because the parents were doctors, I was always very connected closely to the people,
Ground
right?
reality.
So it is not, yeah. So the ground reality, I was always very familiar with that, right? In terms of how a person could not even pay, let's say, I remember my parents started their doctor fees at 20 rupees, right, as their fees, and the people who couldn't even afford that amount of money. So seeing that very, upfront close, to then, having gotten exposure through a body life, I think during the boarding time, of course, you don't think much about IITs and medical. But this is again in the 90s, so you are kind of mainly enjoying the school life. But I think I came to Ranchi in 11th, 12th, and that was when after class 10th is when I decided that you want to pursue the IIT route because for some reason I didn't feel very comfortable becoming a doctor. Even though my parents were doctors, I didn't want to become a doctor for some reason. And I decided, okay, if that's not the route, then the other route is obviously take become an engineer, right? So obviously, like any kid growing up in the 90s in Bihar, IIT computer science is the dream for everybody, right? So we all had that aspiration. I got to Ranchi in 11th, 12th, did my studies there, where at DV Shamli, where Tony was my senior there, and we basically that is the first time I really thought about, okay, this is this new world altogether, this world of IIT, this world of competitive exams, this world of getting into good college and things like. So I think for me it was important that I enjoyed that schooling life completely. And then when the time was right, we basically able to understand the importance of getting to good college and then basically making a career from there. So yeah, I think that's more or less for me in terms of the how the whole inspiration for IIT started. And obviously, I joined a school where it was very common for people to get under 100 rank in JEE. And so that was like this environment was very different over there, right? The whole
Mm,
um, and that kind of inspired you a lot, right? That yes, this is something you want to kind of get in.
great. And how did design come into your life? And you end up picking design, or design picked you up?
Yeah, I
What
think it was the other
actually
way around.
happened?
Yeah, I think that's a great way of putting it. I think I always say that design picked me rather than me picking design. Uh, so it just so happened that on the day of my counseling, I go up to IIT Delhi in the Dogura Hall at the counseling center, and this is the days when we had like physical counseling. There was no online counseling then,
Yes, yes.
and we had to go and fill in our choices, and it just so happened that uh, one of the disciplines that were open were IT Guwahati design and IT Guwahati Kharagpur, and like we had this. Uh, like any as like any adult like any kid in growing up in Bihar, IIT was a big thing. Like, we all wanted to get into IIT, so it was like whichever branch is there, just get into an IIT. So I was okay, fine. Architecture is something which I know about because and also I had my cousin who was studying at IIT Kharagpur at that point in time. So that was my first choice that I put in out there. And the second was obviously putting in IIT Guwahati design. And this is also time where you could actually write J multiple times, more than two
Uh,
times, more than three times. And so I was like, fine, let me just join in, and then maybe again next year I'll attempt again and try to get into a better branch. It just so happened that I got my and I remember like while the counseling days, there was this Professor Natkani who was there at the counseling center from the design department in IIT Guwahati. He's the one who had started the program there. And interesting, not a single batch had graduated from the program
yeah,
by
that
then.
was the first.
So we were the fourth batch, but there was like in that year there'll be the first time there'll be fourth year students in design, and nobody had graduated, so nobody really knew about what would come out of it, right? So for me, it was like, yeah, I just had this leap of faith moment. I was like, maybe if they have opened up a branch of design in IITs, they must have thought something about it, right? They must be not that fools to start a branch in IIT that at a BDS level if they don't see a scope of it, right? So that was my leap of faith. I just signed up for it, and it just so happened that I got into it. Of course, I had lots of kind of convincing around to do because first of all, it was IIT Guwahati, which itself was not very known by then. This I'm
Yes,
talking when IT Guwahati was still about 7 years old at that time, right? It's 2000, 2001.
very new.
So
I think
IT
campus
Guwahati was
was
still
also
very new.
not built then. Campus was
Correct. So
also
the
not
campus
very
was very
much.
new. So first of all, like people would question whether are you sure you are in a IIT because people had not heard of Guwahati IIT, right? So that was the first question people would ask. Then they will ask, okay, what branch are you studying? And I would say I'm studying in design. And they're like, come on, you must be joking, right? Because first of all, IIT in Guwahati, and second of all, design department, which generally doesn't happen in IITs. Today you have design departments in all the IITs, right? Which is kind of great. But back then it was not the case, right? So first year, I think, first semester, I kind of, really soaked in because we had, design courses and all. But from the second semester, I was really hooked on to it. I kind of decided to stay on the design path. It's kind of very fascinating the way they kind of looked at the world around them and stuff. So that's how I would say, design really like it just so happened that I got design and I stuck on with it. I really enjoyed the journey so far. Uh,
Yeah, and it is quite visible that you have imbibed design in all the job roles that you have picked. In a different form, you
correct,
see design around you. And in fact, we have some conversations between us that where you see that there is inspiration on design in the nature itself. And
correct.
that is something which is very natural. Many people do not have that kind of orientation. So then IIT, I could see that you joined Infosys as a
Correct.
UI designer. That was that a campus placement out of campus?
Um, So interesting not because I actually was very clear when I was the like for whatever reason like however it happened, I happened to be the the department topper back at IIT Guwahati in design in my batch, so all the medals, silver medal and everything. So I was there, as a designer, shopping from the design department. I should be last person not taking up a job in design. It will look very bad on the design department, right? If like the topper of the design department is not doing a job in design, right? So I said, okay, let me go and. So I had two campus jobs, like I think one was in Cognizant, other was in TCS, and I remember when I got the first job offer at TCS. My family, my village, there was all like sweets are all distributed, and people are all very happy. Tata mein job lag gaya and all. And then I got a second job. So suites got distributed again. In the up to दो job lag gayi campus placement. फिर इसीलिए IIT गए थे. And this is like the epitome for people because obviously people aspire to get into IT full job placement. And here I have like two jobs out of campus. And then I say that I'm not joining any of them. People are like shocked. Why would that happen? Because so I said them, see, I'm a designer. I studied design for years. The last thing I want to do is I want to do coding. Right? I kind of decided very clearly back then that I don't want to do coding. I understood coding. I understood the basics of it. We had the basic courses that we did in campus. But I was very clear that I don't want to get into the developer role. Right? So I said, let's see what will happen. So I took a 1 month break after the graduation. I remember 15th May or something was the graduation. Till about 15th June, I took a break at home. And then I just packed my bags and came to Bangalore. Did nothing and just came to Bangalore without a job. Without a job as in like a job that I wanted to pursue. So I had two jobs on hand, but their joining dates were a little bit later on. So I was like, okay, maybe just let me explore. So I actually started doing walk-in interviews in Bangalore, just going to companies, knocking their doors and asking them, do you have an opening for designers? And this is time when obviously there were not many design jobs out there as it is today, right? So imagine this scenario, right? You have this department topper from an IIT, having two jobs, but still doing walk-in interviews, going around, Bangalore, just asking people if they have a design job. And it's just this very weird situation, right? So I did that for about like 45 days. I remember just literally like, I just crashed at a friend's seniors, again, IT body seniors home. I just said, I'm in Bangalore. I'm here to find a job for myself in design, right? And I don't know how long that is going to take. I need a place to stay. So he gave me a mattress. I just put myself in his room in the hall, and I just stayed there for about like 45 days or so. And after that, by beginning of August, I ended up at Infosys, and it was kind of very interesting why I pursued that because I thought the opportunity to be at a place which had been this what do you call this amazing success story of IT in India, right? Just to understand that, to understand how big companies function, because they have good processes. There's lots of learning that's going to happen out there, and purely for the learning bit, obviously salary skills I'll not talk about because back then it was not very high as it is today. But the fact that I was getting the opportunity to learn, I was going to be in a design role, which was something which was I was very inspired by and I just joined. So yeah, that was where how I got into Infosys. Obviously, once I got to them, that's a different story. But
yeah, but it is inspiring in a way because you have picked a non-traditional way of going after jobs, which I believe that people need to do more often these days, because people they join college because there is a placement team that will take care of each other, not learning the levers of really finding a job for yourself. So what you did so early must have been a very crucial lesson for yourself, how to do networking, how to identify opportunities around. So very, very important. But I could see that after Infosys for 2 years, you could immediately see an opportunity for masters and thought US was that do you think US jana hai? Was that the point, or the design actually led you to Indiana? Because I could see that the masters is also in design.
Design, yeah. Yeah, so for me, so for me, as I said, like one of the things that in my career has always been kind of, if you see that journey, there's one thing which is common is I always do something or join something for the amount of learning. And the day I feel that my learning is a little bit stagnated, I'll get kind of, very fidgety to start something new or do something different, right? So while at Infosys, the job was great, obviously onset would happen at some point in time. It was always, we had become 2 years and get to that journey. I just felt that learning was not happening sufficiently. Right? Because see, back in the IT Guwahati also, design department was still new, so it is not like you had in-depth learning that you would have. Right? So while on the job, we picked up a few things, but it was like because I liked design so much, it was important for me to spend more time on doing. And so yeah, while at Infosys, I kind of gave GRE again. So I'd done once at college, but then I got maths course. I gave GRE again while studying, while working, got some admits, and eventually joined. Mainly for the two reasons. One was I was very clear that I wanted to go deeper into studying design, like in a more structured thing manner. And these programs in the US that I kind of looked at had good, structure, had good, had good credibility in the market. They'd been around for a very long time. And the second thing was I was somewhere clear that I want to kind of come back to India immediately after my master's, which again was kind of very for a lot of
Non-traditional.
people it is not non-traditional, right? But I was clear because, now I reflect back upon it. Maybe it was because since I have already been in a boarding school all throughout my life, right? So somewhere that I was playing in the back of my mind, just to kind of be closer home, closer to parents. That was one factor that influenced me. But in generally, this is the time in 2009, 2008, 2009, right, where India was
Yeah,
going through a very interesting and transition period, right? So Flipkart was just happening around the time, like we were starting to think about a product companies were coming up, so I was like, let's be here where a lot of action is. And those two factors kind of influenced me kind of just come back. While I was there in the US, I did work for Motorola for a while because
no
that's what
problem.
my part
Yeah,
of my internship. But then, yeah, coming back, I got back to India. I did some really crazy stuff. One interesting thing that happened while I was, it's important to kind of talk about is while I was at Infosys, actually, while I was at IIT Guwahati, I set up the photography club there, right? And
yeah.
somewhere there was this photography bug that had bit me. And, I was like, saving money, buying a camera, investing in it, getting all the things done, going on tours, doing lots of things. And then while at Infosys also, I kind of did the same thing, right? I kind of saved up from my job, bought a digital SLR, practiced lots of photography, did lots of photography around the world, around the country, traveled around thing. And interestingly, one of my professors told me later on that, uh, because of your photography skills, we actually ended up increasing your scholarship amount so that you could make a decision to come to our university. Right? And I was like, I'd never thought that, something which was started on the sides could actually help me in some other, which I think again for me as a career also as an important learning which I've kept in mind that whatever you do, somewhere or the other, will start to connect and give you some returns, right? We may not see it immediately, but if you just believe in that thing and you do it with full honesty, somewhere it will just inspire. And then obviously when I came back from US after my masters as well, it was again photography that actually helped me survive because I didn't have a job. Again, just like after graduating from IIT, didn't have a job. They want to join, and in the US, anyways, you don't have much of these placement sales and all in college. There, you are on your own, right? So I got back to India, just a degree, no job in hand. Thankfully, not much of an education, a very small amount of education loan that I had, which could be taken care of. Not, but coming back here, and then. I got back to doing photography workshops all across the country, traveling across the country, getting paid for it, doing a lot of assignments, wedding shoots, corporate shoots, advertising shoots, anything which would help me to pay the bills while I was working parallelly in doing some design work as well. So yeah, so that's like from US back to India, trying to build my career in building my own design studio, building my own design projects.
In fact, I remember when we were in campus from 8 to 12, there was a regular talk about some light photography
Correct,
events
correct.
that you used to do. Was that
So
a
in fact,
hobby also? Similar?
yeah. So again, it was kind of very interesting because when I was at Infosys, I had done a workshop on light painting, right? And light painting was something which was taught, like a visiting faculty at IIT Guwahati had done this one workshop for us, just one workshop, 2 hours. I picked that up. I did a 2 hour workshop at Infosys. And interestingly, when I was in the US doing a master's, I got a mail from a college in India saying that they want to invite me to do a light painting workshop in a college fest. And at first, I thought it was a prank because, why would somebody invite me, who am a student, come from the US to do it. So actually I checked with them, are you sure? Because I'm based in the US. It's going to cost you a lot. Are you sure you want to do this? Until then, I had not done any workshop at a college level. I had done it at a small, group of 20 people at Infosys on the campus thing. But I had written about it. So I had blogged about it. I kind of documented the journey. I blogged about it. And some of the pictures that came out were really amazing, right? So that was there on my blog, must be somewhere still there. And so they called me and they said, okay, the only we'll get you here, but the only problem is that we cannot pay you. I'm like, okay, you will fly me out to India. You'll get me like a nice place to stay. You'll take care of everything. It's okay, don't pay me, but I'll just, come. So they actually flew me down from Indiana to Chicago to Chennai to kind of all the way back. And I did this, 2 days workshop in batches at the college campus. And that was a super hit workshop. Apparently, everybody enjoyed the feedback level, like so-called the NPS score as a term was not popular then. But if you ask me, the NPS score was probably in its 90s, right? Everybody really enjoyed it. And then when I was coming back from the US after a master's, I said, okay, maybe I should just explore this thing, right? And if you know, August, September is the college festival time in India, right? We always have this college festival, August, September.
Right.
So I said I had nothing to lose, right? So what I did was I just started pitching to this college festival that, hey, I've done this at NIT Trichy. Would you like to do this? These are some pictures. These are some testimonials. And funnily, it was sold like hotcakes, right? And in this true hustle nature, I was traveling like every month or like every week, so to say, to colleges from Surat to a Surathkal to a Guwahati to a Trichy to whichever part of the country, getting paid for travel, getting paid for doing something which I enjoyed doing, which is workshops. And I was the only person in India doing light painting workshop at that point in time, right? So I had this unique thing, right? Like, this unique brand positioning. And I just loved it. I did that for almost like 1.5 to 2 years. And then, of course, then I thought, okay, let me start with them. So, yeah, that's the light painting story.
But I'm also curious why it did not shape into a big thing for you. Did something change in the market around that time, or some realization came, or you got fed up? Yeah.
So I think it was not. I think it was not about being fed up. I think, as I said, like for me, like fortunately or unfortunately, rather, I actually it's more fortunately, right? I've always had this parallel lives that I have lived. Right? And there's a small reference once again back to IIT Guwahati. So when I was in IIT Guwahati, I read this book by Alik Padmansi. Alik Padmansi is the guy. He's like this, ad man of India, big into advertising.
Yeah.
But interestingly, apart from his advertising life, he also had a theater life. Right? So he talks about his biography, and he talks about how he has lived his two lives parallelly and excelled at both. Right? And somewhere that stuck with me. This is I read probably when I was in probably I think third year in college or maybe the fourth year. And it stuck with me, right? Like saying this guy who can live two parallel lives as a theater person and an ad guru of India. Maybe there's something you could explore. So for me, it has always been photography and design and social entrepreneurship and something else. And somewhere that when you ask this question in the beginning, right, that how do you navigate between one to the other? I think that has always been this parallel tracks for me. And that kind of inspired me, right? That, okay, I can probably because that time design was picking up in India, right? So this is like when design was becoming more popular. You were getting good roles in design, better paying roles in design. So I decided to kind of pursue design a lot more than to kind of pursue photography. Photography remained a hobby, but I never intended to do it very professionally. But yeah, obviously I was doing it for some time. So yeah, it remained like that. And then obviously design is what I kind of pursued.
This thing really excites me, that having two parallel lives, and these parallel lives actually do not let you get bored of monotonicity in life.
Correct. Yeah.
That takes care of a lot of learning. If your learning is dipping in one sector, you can compensate that to the other sector which you are having. So it is interesting, but it also brings back the point that how you would pick the two lives. Many times people are into job where they are contractually bound not to moonlight.
Yeah.
So what would be your recommendation on people to follow these lives, like on a on a interest level. Like if I see you that you had photography as a passion along with design. So
Yeah,
was photography coming during weekends and post-work hours,
yes,
or
absolutely,
so that it doesn't
absolutely.
conflict with your actual role which you are pushing? And
Yeah,
that's where the big lesson lies. People
yes,
confuse
yes, absolutely.
living two parallel lives means doing
In
two
the
at
same
the same
time. Yeah,
time.
correct.
And
No,
that creates a
absolutely.
lot of distraction.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely spot on, Ravish. I think that's a good point you mentioned. So again, um, photography for me was always a weekend thing. And so two things. That's one is, of course, you don't want it to conflict with the domain of work. So that as long as there's no conflict in the domains, photography and design. Although, like as a photographer, you become a better designer. If you're a designer, you can become a good photographer. That's
Yeah.
fine. The learning is there. But the conflict in terms of taking time out of my day-to-day work to go into photography, that would never happen, right? Like I would never do that, right? So in terms of the conflict in the domain of work and conflict in the time of work, right? Those things, if you're able to kind of keep track of it and be open. And remember back in infrastructure, we were very clear about it. In fact, every weekend in when I was at Infosys, we would go out for what we called as the weekend shoots. There was a group on Flickr. There's this platform called Flickr where
Mm-hmm.
we had this group
Photo
called
sharing
Bangalore
play.
Weekend, and we used to have this group called Bangalore Weekend Shoots. So I was one of the like the active members in that group, Bangalore Weekend Shoots. I
Mm-hmm.
still am friends with some people who are from that group. From even today, we are very good friends. And every weekend, you like Saturday morning, Sunday morning, 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock, go to Hampi, go to Nandi Hills, go to some Kiarpura market, some Madiwala market, shooting people, doing these documentary shoots. And that kind of, would happen. And then late evenings, after work hours, I would kind of sit in the office, edit the photos, upload to Flickr, and then over the week probably engage in conversations on Flickr. So that learning was also happening there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that was something which I kind of really got inspired by, saying that okay, I'm going to learn a lot more by being a part of this community, and as long as it's and then obviously there's photography exhibition inside Infosys as well, because people did that, a lot of other people also kind of got some insights from it. Workshops started happening inside because people knew that this is talent that I had developed or skill set that I developed, which I was able to then offer to a lot of people. So yeah, so those are things which I kind of always keep in.
Yeah. Now, I would not talk about the different startups or the faculty of design that you, but
Yeah,
I could see that there was a stint about teaching, which was
yeah.
very natural in you. You also said you taught, you supported the faculty in Indiana, and in
Mhm.
India also you led I think, a design school faculty of uh, design and Institute of Product Leadership. Um,
Mhm.
that for 2 years is not a joke. So there is always a teacher within you. Am I picking
Yes,
it right?
yes, absolutely. So again, as I said, for me, like the quest for knowledge is always there. So I read a lot, right? So because you
Mm-hmm.
read a lot, you engage with people a lot. Uh, I always want to find some avenues where you can, express that knowledge, right? So teaching becomes that natural way for me to just express that knowledge, right? So in fact, next year I'll be teaching at a business school for the first time, like a full-fledged business school as a design faculty. This is next year in summers of 2024. So it's a fall of 2024. But I just enjoyed doing it because I feel that whatever I've learned so far, right, it's an opportunity for me to share with people, and in the process also get to learn a lot. Right? So the thing with being with students is it keeps you updated with the latest trends. It keeps
Yes.
you as a professional. As a professional, uh, I'm always clear about the fact that I want to continuously learn and upskill myself. And being with students who are from the colleges, from the corporates, from the industry, uh, you always have to be prepared, 100%, 120% better prepared, right? So kind of I use that as a way for me to kind of keep myself updated, keep myself prepared all the time. And just sharing knowledge, because I think by sharing knowledge, we learn a lot in the process. That's just been my.
Very interesting. And is that where the inspiration for HST working in education
Yeah,
lies?
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So because for me, so as I said, so growing up, because there's this, at the subconscious, there was this, Bihar as a state which didn't have much good education facilities, specifically in rural communities. And the fact that I really enjoyed teaching. Right? I said let me do something in education, and we decided to start Happiness Trust.
Yeah, but how did you go about this process of the social enterprise? Because for many people, uh, it it feels surreal. कैसे manage
Yeah,
होगा? I have an active job, then this social entrepreneurship, especially when you were based in Bangalore, setting up
yeah,
something back in
yeah,
Bihar. How will I build team? How will things manage? How will funding come? Because Bihar, you could manage donors in Karnataka, Maharashtra region. Bihar के लिए कौन donation देगा? So how did you come about? Or you did just jump it and देखते हैं क्या होता
yeah,
वाला है? How did
yeah.
you go about this?
Yeah, so I think by now, as a part of the DNA, it was already clear, right? Like just jump into it and start doing it. So I'd done it with my first job. I'd done it, after US. I'd done it with photography. So like the fear factor was not there. Right? Okay, let's try doing it. But Stella, my partner, and myself, we decided to kind of start something in Bihar because we were both from Bihar, and we were very clear that we want to start something in education. We were in Bangalore at that point in time, so we registered ourselves in Bangalore. But then we said, okay, our work is going to be in Bangalore, in Karnataka, and in Bihar as well, because both were from Bihar. Now, I think one was, of course, not to chase scale from the very beginning. I think for us, we were very clear that even though we are setting up something in Bihar, we knew that we cannot scale up something from Bangalore in Bihar, not being there present completely. Right? So that was like, from very beginning, we're not, and also we said, let's try out some things and take it slow. So we were never really, let's say, trying to run. We were saying, let's just walk properly. Let's learn to walk properly as well. And find people who can come and join us along the way. So we had, let's say, a manager, Vinay, who joined us just 6 months into our registration, right? So he joined us he registered in March 2013, and he joined us in August 2013. So it's about 6 months, like 5 to 6 months as we started. And he's been around with us from then as well, right?
Yes.
Because what we feel is we want to get people who kind of believe in the vision. And we've always been very vocal about hiring and building very strong local leadership teams, right? So wherever we are, right? So whether we are in Bangalore, whether we work in, so now we work in Bihar and in Uttarakhand, at both places, we have very strong local leadership, right? So we spend a lot of time as an organization to invest in their leadership development. As a professional, kind of making sure that they are aware about those things, they understand, organization development, they understand team building, etc., and give them the ownership to kind of drive those things out there. So that's something which we have done. In terms of funding, also we knew that it was going to be a challenge initially, and that's the reason also why we didn't scale just for the sake of scaling. Because I said, as long as we are able to manage it and sustain it with our own earnings, let's do it for as long as we can. The day we decide to scale will be when we have a good solid program understanding and the ecosystem understanding. That's when we will scale. And when we decide to scale, you'll find the people who will be able to fund us. Right? And that's what happened in 2018. It's almost like 5 years after we had done that program. So what we're doing, we started to get CSR donors. We started to get grants. We started to get them. But by then we were very clear about the program. We were very clear about the team that had been set. That kind of enabled to scale slightly from there.
Even though it looks very structured as you look back, I know there must have been very unimaginable frustrations and challenges as you would have gone through, and it will be helpful for young people and others who want to pursue something in the social entrepreneurship to be aware of, because just to show a rosy picture about something is not a true picture. There are real challenges which you must have gone through. What were your experiences in just not taking too much, but yes.
I'll tell you the biggest challenge. I'll tell you the biggest challenge which was there. The biggest challenge is social acceptance, because coming from an IIT, studied in the US, doing an NGO, in Bihar, right? So in the most backward region of Bihar, right? So it's like you have these layers of like unacceptance that you have, right? So the first thing is to accept yourself that yes, this is something that you have genuinely wanted to pursue. And the fact that there will be challenges no matter what, right? It is never going to be rose. As I said, the very first resistance will come from your immediate family, right? Which is given. They will question, right? Then obviously your friends will question. Then obviously the society will question you. Then the largest people. That question is never going to stop. It's a never-ending journey. It's always going to happen, right? And so in my case, there was like multiple layers also. डॉक्टर साहब का लड़का आईआईटी पढ़ा, यूएस गया,
बाहर गया,
वापस इंडिया आया, फिर एनजीओ खोला और वो भी बिहार के गांव में खोला. So you see this, like how we have structured these things, right? Where we have these challenges because people, the expectation of the society is on these levels, right? So,
yes.
But that also gave me confidence, right? Because I'm the son of the very educated parents, because I studied in the US, because I went to NIT, because I have an exposure from the whole world, I should be the one who should be actually doing this, right? Because I have this experience which I can bring to the work that I'm here trying to set forth, right? And that gave me the inspiration to basically, to pursue what I was doing, right? And then I think, Gandhiji says this, right? First they will laugh at you, then they'll mock you, then they'll accept you, right? I think that I feel right now that acceptance, we are going through the acceptance where people are accepting that, yes, what we are trying to do with this larger vision, because we've been around for 10 years, right? And 10 years to sustain a vision, a dream, and to kind of grow from Bihar to Uttarakhand, multiple places, multiple projects, etc., etc. Now we've also diversified into healthcare, then education, there's manufacturing coming up. So people see that larger vision which I was trying to, which obviously at that time they will never align to. But you have to have that self-belief, most important. Right? That is there. And I know it's easier said than done, but I think that's for me, like I always say that, that and your immediate fear. I think if you start to answer everybody or to start to answer the full world, it's a recipe for disaster. So for me, my immediate families, my wife, my kids, and my parents, they are convinced about it. I'm going in it full time. Otherwise, I'm like, chalo, theek hai, we'll think about it. So you have to draw that boundaries as well. I just want to listen to my wife, my family, and my close friends. But that's about it because everything else is noise, right? And you want to kind of cut out the noise as much as possible.
That's so profound. I think a lot of people would really take a lot from this. Because social acceptance is something we all have faced, and just drawing boundaries. In fact, sometimes we even end up fighting with our own family members. कि नहीं मुझे करना है तो बस करना है, and that might also be very toxic, not take you in the long run. So creating boundaries and getting your buy-ins from your immediate family members. So that is really profound. And I have also, because in my own experience in setting up in Bihar, the issue about availability of talent, committed people, because if you go across Bihar, what kind of work people want to do, har koi exam likha hai. The government jobs is like the crazy thing. I think it is there in the most part of the North India, but Bihar is like a crazy place. Everyone wants to write government exam, and in that space, to find someone committed for a job which is in a non-profit, obviously you cannot pay him or her as good as corporate, and that too in Saharsa. पटना में भी नहीं है, सहरसा में. So for me it has always been a challenge to bring talent from outside. वो तो है ही, but for the people who are from the space, the social acceptance doesn't allow them to join a really good work. So what has been your mantra for really spotting such people, which could help a lot of us?
Yeah, so I think, for me, two things, right? One is in terms of your, the big believer of the fact that we want to hire locally and build locally. Because we were very sure that it's very unlikely for me to expect somebody from a Bangalore or a Delhi or a Mumbai or any other, or even Patna to go and spend their life in Saharsa, right? And this is not even Saharsa. I mean, you have been there. It's Simri Bakhtiarpur, which is like a block of Saharsa district, right? So it's not
Right.
even like a district town. So that was a very clear given from the very beginning. I knew that boss getting people from outside, they can only come for short-term basis. Right? Now, short-term could mean they could come for an, let's say, so currently we have an India fellow who's going to be with us for 15 months, or they would come for a few months, they would come for a few weeks, they would come for a few days, but they would not come for life, right? So that is the first realization, and we kind of realized that very in the very beginning itself that we have to build local leadership teams. And because anybody who is in Bihar who is well educated, well read, well had the coaching centers, they will always go outside Bihar, right? So the ones you're left with are the people who probably don't have that same level of, let's say, exposure or that acumen. They have an interest, but they may not have the same level of skill sets as you expect them, right? The second thing we were very clear on is that the moment I get somebody on board and I'm expecting them to be with us for long term, I know that I'm going to invest a lot of my time, energy, and resources into training that person. Making them aware of that particular value of the training is what kind of emphasize a lot. So if let's say somebody joins me and I say that I want to lead this project, I will go all the way to support that guy to build their leadership skills, right? Get them exposure, make them travel, meet amazing people, and because otherwise they would have never. And also kind of putting very high value on the opportunity that is there at. So, for example, somebody to be associated with any of our projects right now and take ownership on that or kind of be associated with it. It's a high value thing, right? So people have to understand the value of it. So once they understand the value of it, they understand both short-term value and the long-term value. So short-term value is because, okay, here's this immediate month-to-month salary that I get, right? That's the short-term value. But can I grow into a person who, can be confident of saying that a guy actually set up, this organization entirely in Bihar or Uttarakhand? Or let's say, for example, there's my other project manager, Sonu, who is right now leading our entire, we're building this play school chain business, right? Like franchise chain business we're building right now. Again, from the same local town. But in the next call, probably he'll be attending an investor call, right? Pitching to investors, and this is how I build a business. And this is probably he would have never got the opportunity in his life if he had stayed there, right? So getting people to understand the value of what they're getting through what they're getting and whatever it takes for them to kind of step up, right? So we invest a lot in their training, their upskilling, and making sure that they understand the value, the larger vision that we're doing. So they understand the long-term value, and obviously they understand the short-term value. So obviously we don't pay probably as much as corporate, but obviously we're not like bad paymaster as well. Obviously have to balance it, right? So making sure that they understand the short-term and long-term both is the critical part. And obviously hiring locally is what we kind of emphasize a lot.
Yeah. And figuring that out in the very early stage, the personal motivations of a person who is coming into the team would be really helpful to see
Yes.
if you can invest on them, retain them for the long-term period. But still,
Absolutely.
always there is a shiny object syndrome people face. यार मैं यहाँ क्या मरा रहा मतलब I am what I am doing here. And other people are getting into government jobs or getting into good companies. How you, as a founder, they might not be expressing to you directly, but you would be sensing this in some way or other. So what would have been your strategy to counter, give them the value into it?
See, when we kind of engage people or when we do our recruitments, right, I think we are very clear and we try to assess this thing that is this person coming in for a short-term value or a long-term value, right? And it's kind of very evident by now. So we can guess if they start talking salaries, if they start talking compensation, if they start talking, all these, XYZ talks, very materialistic things from the very beginning. We know that this person is in for the short term. Like the moment he gets a different opportunity, we'll kind of go elsewhere.
Yeah.
So that's been our approach. Because for them, that's the way to kind of evaluate the opportunity there, right? So for us, obviously, we try to assess that. And we make it very open, right? These are the options for you right now as well. You can probably join another job. You can go to a different city. You can probably, you can get a better pay somewhere else. All this thing kind of, are very open. We share this. And we try to understand as to why does working in Sahasa, working in Happy Trust best you a lot. Some might say for whatever reasons, some would be very open that I'm willing to spend, let's say, 2 years of my time or 3 years of my time, but beyond that, I probably move out of, right? So
Yeah,
we design our engagement with them accordingly, right? We know that this person is not going to be for too long, so okay, let's not invest too much in terms of leadership development because they won't be for too long. But people who are there who evaluate and test that yes, they are going to stay for a longer period of time, you would invest a lot more. Right. So at the recruitment stage itself, our recruitments are kind of very strict and stringent that ways. So we kind of have these multiple 5 to 6 layers of recruitment levels. We try to assess their interest, personal motivation, societal influence, peer influence, what is kind of influencing you, where is your thought process like, do some recommendation, and then you will decide whether you kind of get.
yeah, and it always helps that you are not in it for a skill. So you can go, you can afford to go slow and aram se evaluating, which people at times let go of these processes so that they can scale fast, and then lot of inefficiency creeps in.
Sure.
But now that we had a very rich discussion around how young people could think about managing to parallel lives and different insights from your experience in Bihar. How do you see the social sector shaping up? And would that be a space for people to even think about? Because I have been talking about this, that in corporate world, to look for a goal orientation, which is above self, is becoming day by day more difficult. And if you want to look at that aspect, ultimately you are joining Unilever for selling soaps and shampoos. If you see it at a why of the organization and you want to relate it to, so except money and some positions, it is very difficult for people to relate. And that relation, people are looking in development sector. But they are very confused, or you can say very uncertain about where this sector is going. And what is your feeling about it?
So I think there are two things, right? One, of course, if you look at, let's say, the development sector about, let's say, 10 years ago, the pay parity or disparity that existed in pay scale was very high, right? So in fact, people were very clear, if I go to corporate, I'm going to be very clearly, earning well, maybe not doing very meaningful work. It's a very contextual thing, right? People have very different understanding of meaningful work. For some people, selling soaps is a meaningful work, and there's no harm in that, right? It's perfectly fine, right? And some was like, if I really wanted to be meaningful, I should go the development sector route and I should become a so-called NGO person. And basically, that's the only way for me to creating impact. So I feel in the past 10 years, or maybe in the past 5 years, that has changed considerably for two things. Right? One, of course, in terms of the understanding how the development sector itself has evolved considerably, right? So I would say it's no longer just a pure civil society organization or a NGO-centric thing, where the whole, image, the brand image of working in the development sector has also evolved. Maybe it's due to the success of, let's say, fellowship programs like the TF Alumni program or Teach for India fellowships, Gandhi fellowships. Wipro has been investing a lot into it. Pyramid Foundation is so a lot of good people now invested in the development sector. As a result of it, if you look at it, the median salary range is also increased considerably. So, you would expect somebody to earn, I wouldn't say at the same par at a corporate, that would be foolish to expect, but at least decent enough so that you can lead a comfortable life in the development sector also. So I think what earlier used to be a challenge is kind of getting eased out with more and more philanthropy capital being invested in the country. They have many more. If you look at the philanthropy initiatives, right, which is kind of heavily influencing all the big business houses or the big business folks in India to kind of invest heavily in philanthropy. The philanthropy in India was a very unstructured thing. It was very small pockets, right? But within the philanthropy initiatives or the likes of Premji, likes of Kani, kind of investing in not what the development sector, making sure that there are these platforms where people can aspire to get decently paying jobs as well. And I think in a way it's become that development sector is also becoming more professional Right? So in a way, it's also good for people. You don't need to always, you don't need to always start your own organization. But let's say like you, Ravish, right? So you were kind of working at Preja or the Parfi, right, at the Pan IIT Foundation, or somebody who decides to work at, let's say even Teach for India, or if you're supposed to work at one of these pyramid foundations, they have a pretty decent, life in terms of the pay scale. It's not very low as earlier it used to be. So that was something, something which I think is something which people are should kind of look forward to. But more than anything, I think the biggest uh, influence should be your purpose. Right? If you really understand as to why you want to join development, uh, money earning is not the purpose that you should join the tax sector and the development sector. The purpose in any domain that you look at, right? If that's something which is really inspiring you, I think there are enough avenues now which can help.
I think on that note, we can close the conversation today. It has been a very rich and very engaging conversation with you, Kshitiz. And I know that we have just scratched the surface, because there is a lot that you have gone through and you have more to share. And it is very heartening to also know that you would be picking up teaching assignments in business schools, because now business schools also need to see design and design thinking applications in different aspects. And maybe because you are going there, some conversation around social entrepreneurship might also come naturally, because you have been living embodiment of that. So I had a very enriching conversation, lot of great insights, and I'm sure audience who has been with us today and those who would be listening to this conversation and recording would be really happy and inspired. So thank you, Kshitiz, for being with us today. Thanks a lot for your
Great.
time.
Thank you so much, everyone.